say that the recording is in progress, so we will have a recording of this as well in case people jump on a little bit late. But welcome. We are night 2 of our 2-part autism and ADHD training series. So in collaboration with Easterseals, our Spark team at Rush, myself and Dr. Ochoa, we're very grateful to co-host this virtual event to provide information and resources to you all. So last week, many of you may have heard from Dr. Ochoa, who provided an overview on the prevalence, the impacts of ADHD, as well as common psychiatric comorbidities with autism and ADHD, as well as ADHD management. So today we are going to bring you part 2 of that series, which will focus on proactive supports for children and young adults with autism and ADHD. Our panelist today, Rose DeCanniere, will lead an interactive training to provide information on teaching organizational strategies and social skills, as well as utilizing proactive strategies with individuals with autism and ADHD. So all participants will receive access to the presentation handouts and supplemental resources afterwards. And at the end, we are going to rejoin. So all of our panelists today will rejoin together to answer your questions. So you can go ahead and move to the next slide, and I can give a little bit of an introduction for everybody after some housekeeping. So we have a couple ways for attendees to engage with the panelists and presenter tonight. You can use the chat feature as well as the Q&A. We will likely save most of the questions for the panel at the end, but please do ask questions throughout. And if it does make sense, we'll kind of pause, and there'll be a couple times in which we seek some of your input and your questions. So please do use those. During the panel, we will also have an opportunity, if you would prefer not to type, to raise your hand, and we will unmute your, and you will be able to unmute you. Throughout the presentation, none of the attendees can be seen, so you are automatically muted and your video is off to maintain privacy. If you'd like to submit a question within that Q&A anonymously, you just have to click that button. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Perfect. Well, as I said, our presenter today is Rose DeCanniere, who's a certified special education teacher and brings her really vast experience in disability services on the teaching side and administration side to our talk today, as well as to the panel afterwards. We also have with us Adriana Schmidt, who will be joining the panel. And she's held a variety of roles within the autism world as a paraprofessional and special education teacher, and now as an instructional specialist in a BCBA at Easterseals. We will have Dr. Ochoa, our presenter from last week. He is a board certified developmental and behavioral pediatrician, an associate professor and division chief of the Developmental and Behavioral Pediatrics Department within Rush University Medical Center. He's also the co-PI of the Spark study at Rush. And finally, myself, my name is Holly Lechniak. I'm a licensed clinical social worker with the Arts Autism Center at Rush and one of the lead team members on the Spark study. Similarly to this team here, I've worked for a number of years, close to 15 years, with children and adults with autism and their families in a variety of settings. So we're really excited to collaborate and share information with you all today. And with that, we can go to the next slide. Great. So this training is kind of brought to us by Spark. As I mentioned, Dr. Ochoa and myself are on the Spark team at Rush. Spark is hosting this event really to, with that mindset of bringing additional information and resources to you all. So research is all about kind of learning and sharing and knowing what questions we should ask and who we need to take that and learn that from. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So Spark is a landmark study and it's a landmark autism research project. We're looking to make important progress within autism really by learning more. Spark stands for Simons Foundation Powering Autism Research. And it's the largest genetic study of autism ever. And really the goal of Spark is to speed up research and advance our understanding of autism, as it says right there on the slide. Families can enroll in the study and share medical and behavioral information through surveys and a saliva sample for DNA analysis. And really what that empowers us to do, you can go ahead and go to the next slide. What that empowers us to do is really learn through the participants. We're aiming to really engage a large cohort of individuals as well as their biological parents when available, so that we can really do, there's kind of three prongs to that. We want to be able to identify new genes, so gene discovery. We want to accelerate research, and through that match families to additional research opportunities so that we can, again, just continue to learn more about autism. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So through that, Spark has already been going on for a number of years. We're in, I think, the 6th year of the study. And so well over 25,000 individuals have been able to participate and engage. And with that number, it's 25 individuals with autism. So in addition to that, their families and siblings. And we've been able to return results to about 10% of those families, which has been able to increase the number of genes that we know are linked to autism. And again, it's really with that goal of accelerating and moving research and information about autism forward. Go ahead. And just a brief slide on who's eligible to participate. It's a really inclusive study. Participants must live in the United States. As of right now, read, write, and consent in English, but we will have a Spanish Spark launching in the coming year. And then participants should be an independent adult with ASD or the parent of a child or a dependent adult with ASD. Biological siblings are welcome to participate. And really, the main qualifier is having a professional diagnosis of autism. So that is all we are going to probably mention on Spark today. If individuals have questions, feel free to reach out to the team. But again, Spark is grateful to co-host this event so that we can continue to learn more about autism and then share information back to families and providers within the autism community. Go ahead and go to the next slide.
Sure. So, oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay, so I'll talk a little bit about our services. So at Easterseals Chicago, we serve Chicago and the greater Rockford region. And we also have 2 big branches of services, the comprehensive autism and behavioral services side, as well as our early learning and developmental services. So comprehensive autism services is where our Illinois Autism Partnership is from, and as well as our schools, Harry's Buttons, and our TAP program, which is an autism support as well. And then early learning has our Head Start programs, family support, and our CFCs, our Child Family Connection programs as well. So we serve nearly 30,000 clients annually, and we employ over 600 dedicated professionals and programs all around the Chicagoland and Rockford region of Illinois. And here's some wonderful pictures of some of our clients and staff members as well. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So as Holly mentioned, we are going to be talking about proactive supports today for autism and ADHD. So I really appreciate you all coming today, and I hope you enjoy. If you have questions, as Holly mentioned, we'll be answering them at the end, but we may have a little bit of interactive questions as well. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started. I know she already introduced me, so I won't spend a lot of time here, but again, I'm very honored to be here today with you. I recently finished my master's in educational leadership, and so I have the special ed background, as Holly mentioned. I taught for 4 years and then came to Easterseals to serve as the manager of our adult services, and then transitioned back to the school side at Easterseals, and recently became an autism specialist following the birth of my 2nd child. So I'm very happy to be able to join this wonderful team. And if you have any questions at the end, I'll have all my information as well. Okay, so some goals for our session today. So first, we want to make sure that we're understanding the importance of teaching organizational and social skills to children with autism and ADHD, as well as young adults. And then also to utilize proactive strategies and promote success and independence to decrease challenging behaviors. So those are the two main goals that we're going to focus on throughout throughout the presentation this evening. All right, so our agenda for today, we're going to go through routines and visual supports, organization strategies, positive reinforcement, social skills, parent support tips, and then we'll have our Q&A panel. Okay, so we're going to get started with routine and visual supports. So we're going to start with that hand raising feature. So if anyone that's participating today can raise their hand if you use a calendar or a planner. How about some to-do lists? I see some 3 so far, 4. I certainly do. Awesome, great. Thank you all. You can put your hand down if you did. Thank you very much for participating. So the point of that is that we all really use routines and visual supports in our daily life. I know I would be lost without my calendar. I certainly use my Outlook calendar to be able to plan for meetings and presentations like tonight, and I would need that to organize myself. So people with autism and ADHD are not the only ones who really benefit from those routines and visual supports that we have that we'll be going through today. Okay, so as I mentioned, this is a tool that is a life skill. So we really want to make sure that we're teaching these routines and establishing predictable patterns and routines for our children or for our students if you're a professional. So what do home and community-based routines do? We want to make sure that they are establishing those patterns and activities. So, there's things like our morning routine or after school. Those are sometimes that can be really challenging for some people with autism and ADHD. So we want to make sure that we break down steps into manageable pieces so that they really can understand what each activity is. So maybe, coming home for one student might look different for another. And so it's really important that we really illustrate what that should look like and what our expectations are for that. Do you hang your backpack up in the closet, or do you bring it to your room or to your homework space? So routines really ensure those smooth transitions. They help to ensure that the person using that schedule or visual support really understands what they should be doing, how they should get to where they need to be, in the order of activities or routine. And then it also helps to make sure that they are understanding, like I said, the expectations. So what do you want them to do when they get home from school? Do you want them to go straight to doing their homework? Do they need to have a snack first? Just making sure that that is listed for them so that they understand. In order to teach these routines, you really need to make sure that you are prompting them through it and reinforcing them, which we'll go through a little bit later as well, and that you're practicing it regularly and consistently. So you don't want to just give them the schedule. You want to make sure that you're going through it with them, practicing each step and making sure it's manageable for the individual. So here's some examples of some home schedules. So we have on the left-hand side, that's for more of an early learner, which is Velcro and the board maker or line drawings. And they would be placing, so the top side is green and it has go, and then the back would be red and has stop, and it has the other Velcro. So you'd be moving it from the front to the back. And so again, that's for an early learner or someone that needs those visuals in order to understand the words. And you can pair the words with the pictures for that, and that really helps them to break down the steps again. And depending on the child, you may want to have less or more pictures on there at one time. You may need to break things down further. But as you can see, that's kind of their daily schedule for home. In the center, there's more of a weekly calendar, or you can even have a monthly calendar for your family. Thinking of some of the individuals with ADHD who may be, or some of our high functioning autism folks that may need some written words. And also this could help organize the family, and just, you could have one for each of the children and one for each adult so that people know what to expect when there's special events coming up. And then on the far right-hand side, that's one where you're checking off. Again, this could be written for those that are readers. It could have the pictures for those that need it. And you really want to make sure that the schedule is made for their worst day. So If sometimes the student or the individual is a reader, but then sometimes they need those pictures when they're having a hard time, you want to make sure those pictures are there and available to them so that they really can follow it at any time, even if they're having one of those tough days. And you can see there's some built-in reinforcers on here so that they can select when it's time for that free time. They can see exactly what their choices are. When it's time for a snack, they can see exactly what their choices are. So you can really make sure that it's laid out for them ahead of time. All right, so there's also activity schedule. So not only do you want to have that daily schedule or weekly schedule or calendar, it's really helpful to have some of these activity schedules to break things down further. So as I mentioned, it could be something like the afternoon routine or the morning routine. You can see in the center, there's some bathroom, washing myself, brushing teeth. So some of those skills that they may be working on, life skills. On the left-hand side, you can see that's a good support for if they're doing work at home. I know with remote learning, we had a lot of learners, working from home. And so it was helpful to set up some different systems for students to be able to access their work time at home. But you can use this for homework or for other activities, chores that you need to. So you can see the clock is color coded so that they can see what their after school schedule is. And then there's another one with the clocks on the top that has just the little post-it tabs that correspond to the bigger post-its, and they're color coded so that they can see what activity is at what time. And then on the right-hand side are some different ways you can use technology to do this as well. So on the top, there's that is called the to-do visual schedule from Enuma. So I'll put that in the chat later, and we can also include that in the resources. It's $12.99, but the cool thing is it does sync to your Apple Watch. And so it's a really cool tool for some of our older students who may have that and may need that support to be able to access it through at any time. Really, they can look and see, oh, what time is it? Oh, I have to do reading now. And then on the bottom, there's the Notes app on your iPhone or other smart device. And so you can write down the schedule in there. Another cool way of using technology is the Reminders app on the iPhone, and that you can put in some scheduled times and alarms as well. All right, so some tips for success with routines. So one of the things is to review the next day's schedule before bed. Really, whatever way makes most sense for you and your child, but it's good to review the schedule regularly. Again, you may want to also look at the big calendar if you guys have a family calendar or a monthly, weekly calendar, just to prepare for upcoming events or changes in routine. I know with the summer starting, there's probably different activities happening. They may be going to baseball, or they may be going to their sibling soccer game. And so it's just really important to make sure that you're also putting those special events on there as well, so that they can prepare for that change in routine. Having your child pack their backpack the night before. So that's another good tip, just to keep them organized. We're going to talk a little bit more about organizing their learning environment, but just making sure that they're ready to go so that there's not that morning rush. I know that's easier said than done sometimes, but making sure that's a part of your schedule can really help to ease the anxiety that may happen in the morning when you're trying to rush out the door. Embedding choice and adapting routines. So again, you want to make sure the individual has a say within that routine. So you want to leave room for choice, like that one schedule you saw that had the free time and it showed some different options. Sometimes you do have to help your son or daughter to, make that choice or give them different choices instead of leaving it free or open. But you want to make sure that you're giving them that flexibility as well, so that they have time to relax. It shouldn't all be work, right? And built-in flexibility as well, so that way you can illustrate when there is change happening. Of course, we don't, we want to make things as routine as possible for people, but we want to make sure that we also have that opportunity to make changes as needed. All right, so organization strategies. So I know for me, when I come into a very cluttered environment, I start to get very anxious, and especially if I'm working in that environment, I immediately start kind of making piles and putting things away because it's really distracting to me to have a lot going on and when I'm trying to get some work done. So it's really super important to set up your environment for success. So I know I have a sibling with ADHD, and I know in particular organization was a challenge for him. And so sometimes it's helping them with those systems. As you can see on the left-hand side there with the picture, there's some color-coded binders. There's bins that have labels on them. They may have picture labels or written labels depending on the needs of the child or young adult. And then you can see there's also some alternate seating options. So there's a bouncy ball to sit on. You could also have fidgets in one of those bins so that if they need something to kind of hold on to as they're working, that it's available to them. So again, clutter-free, distraction-free zones are really helpful. It's an evidence-based practice to really decrease that anxiety and discomfort and increase that on-task behavior and productivity. All right. Here's a couple more examples of some home learning environments. So again, if you wanted to set up a homework station, it may not always be possible to have a specific spot that they're always working, but you can always use things like a whiteboard, as you can see on the left, to really outline what they're going to be doing if you're clearing off the kitchen table or wherever you need to do for that workspace. But just making sure that you're really outlining what they need to do and breaking it into manageable steps. And then on the right-hand side too, you can see that they have a visual schedule with checklists. And so that way they have their schedule of what they need to do at home for homework. And then making sure within that schedule, again, that you're leaving time for movement breaks and that you are making sure that there's time for reinforcement and that you can, and that it's manageable for the individual. So you may need to break things down further, or just make it into the 1, 2, 3, like you see on the left. You can see there's two kind of different options. All right, so some tips for success. For homework, it's really important to set a consistent start time that could really minimize, again, that stress of trying to get your child to start their homework and making sure that it's done on time, that they have the time that they need to get what they need done. So setting that consistent start time can just help build that routine so that they know, I come home from school at 3 o'clock, and then by 4 o'clock is my homework time after they have some downtime. That you have a distraction-free zone as much as possible. Again, I know it may not always be possible to have their own special desk or space, but to try to make sure that there's a space where they can clear off the table and have it organized and distraction-free. Making sure that you're staying close by to help. A lot of people with autism and ADHD may need some extra help in following that routine, especially if it's something new, or help with their homework. And so it's just important to stay close by. And then providing those breaks and breaking up activities into achievable steps. So making sure that they have that opportunity to make choices for breaks, giving them that movement time and having fun afterwards, because they spent the whole day at school, potentially depending on the age of the individual. And so just making sure that they have that time to relax and be a part of the family. And then chores, using a calendar or a chore chart to designate responsibilities can be helpful. Again, that could be a part of that fridge calendar that you saw earlier. You can set reminders on your phone on the individual's phone. If it's a teenager, it may be helpful to have them have their reminder app, and so that they know what times or what days they need to be doing some of those different activities. Providing positive reinforcement throughout. So again, we'll be talking about that later. And then breaking down steps and taking pictures to illustrate the expectations. So you saw some of those activity schedules that break those down a little bit further. And this will be a part of the packet that'll be sent out to you, but there is a little scanner. We're providing you a resource for some schedules for home for the summer if you are looking for something for that. So hopefully that will help you guys to create your own schedules at home. All right. And I can also put that in the chat later too. So positive reinforcement. How do we motivate our individuals with autism and ADHD to do all of these great things we're asking of them? That's the next part of our presentation here, is going through that so that we can make sure that all of these great things that you're setting up are set up for success. All right, so we're all motivated by different things. And so it's really important to make sure that we're determining what's motivating to our child and what behavior you really want to prioritize for change, and what you really want to see from that individual. So using positive reinforcement is really just making the act of encouraging positive behaviors and decreasing negative behaviors. So if you really want your son to put away his backpack at the end, when he walks in the door, and put away his shoes, then maybe you would have an if then. So if you put away your shoes and backpack without me asking, then you can have 5 extra minutes of TV time. Just making sure that it's, again, geared towards the person that you're reinforcing, and that you're really prioritizing. You want them to really be organizing and putting away their things. So that's what you want to see from them. Some other examples of positive reinforcement: it doesn't always have to be something tangible. It could be, just cheering them on, giving them a high five or thumbs up, giving them a hug, pat on the back, offering a special activity. Sometimes, just giving them that extra time to read with you or play a game. We'll talk a little bit about behavior specific praise. And then there's also that tangible reward, as you can see on the right-hand side. That's kind of more of a typical token board, where it has the rules and expectations. And then inside are the choices of what they can earn. And then they would earn tokens every time that they're following those rules explicitly. All right, so here's some examples we have. On the top, you can see another one for those early learners, where it's a first then board. You see, first I have to do this, then I get that. And then again, they would have their expectations clearly listed, and different options, what they can work for. And then again, on the right, you see the one that has the rules, and there's also a countdown on the top as another way of showing them how much they have to do before they get what they are working for. And then on the bottom left, and then also in the bottom right, there are some different self-monitoring tools. So sometimes you may want to involve your child as much as possible, and make sure that they're helping to come up with those rules that you're looking for them to follow, keeping it simple and making sure that it's very explicit and behavior specific. So I followed directions the first time. I looked at my teacher while she was speaking. I know these are more school specific, but it can be things like I listened to my parent the first time, or I put my backpack away without asking, things like that. And then having them make sure that they're going through and letting you know if they did that or not. And so you may have to practice with them and kind of go through and help them through it, but it's a good way of getting them involved in the process. And you can see on the right bottom, there's also another one that may go from home to school. And so then they could see explicitly what they need to be doing on the left-hand side, and going through for each subject or each day to to show how they did in each of those subject areas, or each of those behaviors. And then in the center, there's that if then, and that's a really cool way of just doing something quick, so that way you can really focus on maybe one specific behavior for the week, and that's what they're working for, and that's what they're working on. And you can see it's, if you get ready for school on time, then you get to go on a trip to the park after school. So it has to, again, be meaningful to the person, but these are just some good examples of ways that you can set them up for success. Okay, we're going to go through some behavior specific praise. So this is really a way of, rather than saying what not to do or reprimanding, it's really a way of positively reinforcing the behaviors you do want to see by being very explicit with your praise. So it should be quick, meaningful, sincere. You don't want to be saying something sarcastic or, wow, I can't believe you came to school today. I can't believe you finally put your backpack away. Good job. It should be very meaningful and sincere, more positive for the individual. So something like, thank you for putting away your laundry, or I like how you washed your hands all by yourself. There's some other kind of sentence starters on the left for some examples. But you want to make sure it's, again, considering your child's characteristics and adjusting accordingly. They may, find you want to make sure that it's, again, geared to you want to see from them. So you're really focusing on if you want them to do something by themselves, that you're really telling them, I love how you did that all by yourself. And you should be trying to do as more praise than you're doing corrective statements. So corrective statements would be, you know, telling them what not to do or saying no, or and trying to minimize that and tell them what you want to see from them is a really good way of minimizing that problem behavior and increasing the chances of seeing those positive behaviors. Okay, so some tips for success. So focusing on 1 to 3 easily achievable behavior goals. This can be in tandem with the school team if your child is school aged, or it could be something that you're focusing on within the home, but making sure that, you know, you're not trying to target too much. I know sometimes with my toddler, my husband might say, he didn't earn this because he didn't do X, Y, Z. And I'm like, well, but we told him he could have it if he finished his dinner, you know? So we want to make sure that we're consistent and that we're focusing on just 1 to 3 behavior expectations rather than trying to, you know, have a perfect kid all of the time, because we know with any kid that's not going to happen. Making sure that you're setting those clear expectations and using positive language. So rather than saying don't hit or don't get out of bed late, we want to make sure we're saying what we want to see them do. So we want to say you need to have quiet hands, or you need to walk to the school bus by, or you need to be at the school bus stop by 8 o'clock. Sorry, I'm not sure when school starts these days, apparently. And then ensuring rewards are meaningful and sustainable. So you want to make sure you're checking in regularly with your child to see, you know, maybe originally they wanted iPad as a reward and now it's becoming not so meaningful or not as exciting to them. So making sure you're switching things out, you're exposing them to different things and seeing what they are most reinforced by. And then it's sustainable too. So, you know, you don't want to say we're going to go to the park anytime you have quiet hands if you know that sometimes you won't be able to go because it's raining or because you have to go to a meeting. So making sure that whatever you're offering is available. And again, it could be different things, different times. So you might just say this isn't available today and have them choose something different. But just making sure that the reward matches what you're asking them to do. A big tip is to not take tokens or rewards away. So once they've earned something, they should earn it. You know, they may be still working towards something more, but you don't want to ever be taking something that they earned away. That would be like saying, okay, you came to work today and but you didn't get your presentation done, so we're going to cut your paycheck in half. I don't think people would be too happy about that. Reviewing expectations regularly. So whatever those goals are that you decide, and hopefully potentially with your child, that you're working on those goals together and that they help to identify those goals, but that you're reviewing those expectations regularly. And that could be something, again, that's embedded in those visual supports and routines that you have in place. You can put those little reminders on their apps on their phone or on those calendars or schedules as well, just so that they're remembering what you're expecting from them. And again, that consistency is super important, making sure that your whole family's on the same page, or that you're on the same page with educators in your child's team as well. So that way you're all consistent. All right, so next we are going to be talking about social skills. This is one of my favorite topics. I actually used to manage a program for teens and young adults with autism and other disabilities. And it was a way of connecting them with other friends. And we had Saturday night socials where they would come and do a dance and there would be a theme. And, you know, we really helped them to learn some different ways of socializing with their friends and making new friends. We had scripts and a lot of great things for them. So near and dear to my heart. Many individuals with autism and ADHD have some social deficits, and so it's really important that we focus on some social skills training with them. both in the school setting as well as at home. So one of the things I like to talk about that I remember from a training I went to way back when on the hidden curriculum. It's a really awesome tool, and I really enjoy learning more about it. But anyways, the hidden curriculum is social rules that are expected and assumed, but never taught directly. So things like this is a good one, because I know a lot of people with, a lot of educators may be women. And so, but a lot of people with autism are boys. And so you may be taking them to the restroom or teaching them to use the restroom. And you may teach them by taking their pants all the way down. But then when they get to a urinal and they try to do that, that doesn't seem socially acceptable, especially once they get to be 10, 13, 14, 15 years old. That becomes even more socially unacceptable. So making sure that when you're teaching, that you're teaching them the socially acceptable way from the beginning. A lot of people with autism and ADHD may learn that rule or that way of doing something, and then it's hard to reverse that. So you want to make sure you're teaching them the way that they should be doing something from the beginning, and really explicitly teaching some of those concepts, because they're things that we just assume, but we don't always teach our individuals. So here's some examples of some ways that things could be challenging, or some challenging situations you might run into. I'll just read a couple of them. So Daniel's telling a peer about something that happened at recess, but his peer keeps looking around and checking his watch, but Daniel just keeps talking. Parker's sitting with classmates at lunch. He hears one peer say, "Me and my brother went to the baseball game." Parker tells his peer that it's grammatically incorrect to say "me and my brother." I'm sure some of you professionals have worked with someone like that, or maybe some parents have kids that have said some things like that because they learned that rule, and then they think that they should be correcting people on it. So none of these things are wrong, but it's just not what's considered socially acceptable. And so we just want to make sure that we're providing them the tools that they need and the skills that they need to successfully interact in these social situations. So things like scripts and role playing and some of these different strategies we're going to talk about will really help individuals to understand what their expectations are in social settings. Of course, you can't prepare them for everything, but it's great. These tools are also great once they've run into these challenges to kind of come back and go through and see, how you can do it better the next time, or how you can support them the next time. All right, so social narratives and social stories. These are a great way for preparing individuals before a social situation, or to really outline what your expectations are, and the thoughts and feelings of others. So they're not intended to behavior, but they do, explicitly share what the learner should be doing. They are intended to be used when the person is calm. So it shouldn't be something that you try to bring out when they're already upset, and making sure that you're going through it regularly and reviewing it often. They should be positive, supportive, and directive. So again, very clear directives, not a lot of language, but very clear sentences and verbal directives. And they're introduced one at a time for a specific situation. So you can see that one, I can be safe on the bus. Here's a couple more examples for using a tissue and personal space. So just some good ways of reminding them and maybe proactively teaching them some of these skills ahead of time, so that they know, what might make other people feel uncomfortable, and also what is socially acceptable in these situations. All right, so here's some apps for video modeling and social stories that I wanted to share. So on the left, there's Model Me. This is the Going Places one, but they also have different ones for social skills. It's a really great tool, and they have some free apps on that you can download that have good ways of kind of going through different steps ahead of time. So they have things like going to the doctor, or going to a restaurant, and really breaking down the steps and talking about the social skills needed in those settings. In the middle, there's Touch Autism Social Stories Creator and Library. Again, another free app from the App Store. So you can create your own social stories or choose from some of the ones that are already created in the library. And then iModeling is a way of making some video models for an individual to really understand what the expectations are, or to review what to do in different settings or situations. These are power cards. So you can see on the right there, there's one, when things don't go her way, Elsa says, let it go. So as you can see, these are really individualized to the person that they're trying to reach. So maybe, it should have something that they're really interested in. So if the person is really interested in dolphins, as you see, they used a dolphin picture and said, dolphin wants to remind you to. So they're really just small cards that can be carried with the individual or put on their desk or in their room at home. They're written in the first person and from the point of view of the character. And they should contain a picture and 3 to 5 steps or a quick reminder to address the situation. So just a good way of reminding them of some of those social skills. So again, Dolphin wants you to remember to share your toys, friends share their toys, and friends share. So just to make sure that you have that they have those kind of reminders for some situations that come up, or if there's some specific things they're working on, this could be a good tool to remind them. For conversations, excuse me, you can see on the left, there's a script for meeting someone. So it has just kind of the different steps for, hi, my name is, what's your name? And it's just a good way of reinforcing what they should do when they meet someone new. You can see in the middle there's just a reminder for stopping and listening, waiting, and then they can talk once the other person's done talking. On the bottom, that was something we made for a school that one of our other coaches in, and it's a conversation book. So there's different topics, and they would flip through to kind of have some different sentence starters, different topics to go through. Some individuals with autism and ADHD may have very specific interests and may have a hard time transitioning to different topics, or may not have the skills to start a conversation. And so these just give some different ways of getting that student in this situation ways to start a conversation with their peer. And then in the top, there's some different flip cards. So there's things that you can say to other kids while at the playground. On the right hand side, there's some different questions that that you can go up and ask up here, so that they have the sentence starters there, so that the individual remembers kind of some different ways of asking peers questions. Okay, and then lastly, for our social skills, is role play is another great tool to use with individuals with autism and ADHD. So with role play, you really want to define what the scenario is. So for example, if your child maybe, let's go back to the one that, just kind of kept talking to the individual, even though the other student was checking his watch. So maybe you'd go back to that and talk through it and say, okay, so you were talking on the playground and your friend just kept checking his watch, and then eventually just walked away and you got upset. So what do you think? How do you think they were feeling? And making sure you're going through that with the individual and talking through the situation. And then defining, what they could do in and acknowledging their feelings. So making sure that you're telling them it's okay to feel upset or sad that they walked away from you. And it's okay to be really interested in talking about this one thing. So just making sure that you're acknowledging how they feel in that situation, but also talking about how the other person that they were interacting with felt. And then working with your individual to determine some appropriate responses. So maybe coming up with 1 or 2 choices for, or 2 to 3 choices for how they could do things differently in the future. So maybe they could say, let's talk about something. They could have a tool to say, let's talk about something you want to talk about, and then we could talk for a minute about what I want to talk about, and maybe having them wear a watch so that they can see that they're really staying on the time and really not going over a minute when they want to talk about what they want to talk about. And then acting out the scenario. So again, with role play, you may have, you may be the other student that's on the playground, and you're checking your watch and seeing if they kind of come up with those solutions that you came up with. And then reinforcing positive responses. So it may not go well the first time, but reinforcing anything that they did well with that role play, and making sure that you're just reviewing again some of those different choices with them. All right, so we're on our last few slides here, and then we're going to have our Q&A. I just wanted to end with some support tips. I know from experience, since like as I mentioned, my sibling has ADHD, and I know it can be challenging sometimes, especially when you're working with the school and trying to make sure that you are getting that homework done, that you're getting them to do all of their responsibilities at home, that you're getting to all the different activities. And it can be really stressful. So just making sure that you take that time for yourself, and doing whatever makes you happy or relaxed at least once a day. I know that, just helps to get in the good headspace to be able to handle some of those challenges that may come up. So taking a walk, talking to friends, exercising, meditation. I know for me, if I don't get my exercise in the morning, that really makes my day drag a little bit more, and it makes it harder for me to, handle some of the challenges that may come up. Advocate. So you are your child's number one advocate, and you're an active member of the IEP team. So making sure that, you are a part of that initial process of talking through what goals, and that your son or daughter is also part of that process, in, determining what they want to be working on and what they think is most important to them. And again, making sure that that IEP or 504 plan really outlines those supports needed, and that the team is following through on those plans. Coming up with a communication system is really helpful. I know, just making sure that there's a way to collaborate with teachers. I know with my parents, they had a notebook that would go back and forth with, or an agenda book, I guess, that my brother would have, where he had to write down his assignments, and then the teacher would have to check off that he wrote down all the assignments he needed to do, and that he had all the steps listed for what he needed and the materials. And then my parents would also check it. Now it would probably be more on an iPhone or iPad, but you get the drift. All right, and then maintaining a positive outlook. So, just accepting your child as they are, making sure that we're remembering that some things they may not have control over, may not be doing on purpose. I know, again, from experience, that I really had to think about all the things that, my sibling was doing well, and trying not to focus on some of those things that could be challenging or quirky, and remembering that, it wasn't on purpose, or, that he just needed more support sometimes. Celebrating every success, and keeping your sense of humor is huge. So, every small success, making sure that it's really something that you're celebrating with your child is really a good way of keeping their self-esteem up. I know Dr. Ochoa last time we met really talked about some of the self-esteem issues that may come up with people with ADHD and autism. And so it's really important that we're, supporting and really celebrating those successes. Picking your battles and focusing on the long-term goal. So again, that kind of goes back to some of that positive reinforcement, and making sure that we're really just focusing on those 1 to 3 manageable goals, and not really, and picking our battles when it comes to some of those little things that come up. And believing in your child. So I thought this quote was good from when I was kind of looking into some ADHD resources. Believe in your child. Start the day by making a mental or written list of all the things about your child that are special, positive, valuable, and are unique, and trusting that your child can succeed as he or she learns, changes, and matures. So that's with that, I think we are about ready for the panel discussion. So again, if you have any questions, here is my contact information. And I'll be sharing the resources. As I mentioned, we have that schedule resource for you all that will be sent out. And there's also that QR code that's in the presentation. And I can put that in the chat once we start the panel. And then I will also have this presentation will also be sent out. Thank you so much.
Rose, thank you so much. That was so incredibly helpful. And just to reiterate, in the follow-up emails, we will also send a link to the resources and the PDFs as well. So Adriana and Dr. Ochoa, if you'd like to join us on video, there we go. And then feel free to either in the chat or in the Q&A feature for attendees to enter in the questions that you have. I know that one question that comes up a lot, particularly as I work with families over time, is how does ADHD evolve and change over time? And so really, as we're going from childhood to adolescence to adulthood, what might be some of the things that we can expect to see, and what might be some of the ways in which we support that? And so maybe I'm going to point this to Dr. Ochoa for you first from maybe the medical perspective, and then Adriana and Rose, you can elaborate on kind of the intervention and behavioral support side.
Okay, thank you, Rose, for a great presentation. Yeah, ADHD changes when, if you think about the combined type ADHD, you see a lot of hyperactivity and impulsivity in young age. And as kids grow older, going to later elementary school, this hyperactivity, impulsivity tends to fade. And but the ADHD is still there, and you start seeing more of the inattention. The inattention becomes more obvious. The impulsivity oftentimes stays, but it's not as high as you can see in younger children. So that's with the combined type. In the inattentive type, you know, those kids go a little bit under the radar when they are young. You know, the inattention is the big issue. As they grow older, there might be the inattention stays there, the executive function challenges stay there and become more apparent because there's more demands for these individuals. And sometimes the comorbidities tend to show up more later on, like patients with inattentive type ADHD, as they grow older and they are more self-aware of their challenges, they may have more anxiety symptoms, more depression symptoms. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And Rose or Adriana, I know that's a big question to ask on the intervention side. How do things kind of shift and change over time? But what might be some of the key things that a parent of a teen or an adult with ADHD might want to consider as, or even of a young child as their child ages with supports?
Do you want to go, Adriana? Sorry, I wasn't sure.
You can go.
Okay. All right. So I would say, as you can see, when I was going through some of the different supports, like the schedules and things, they should evolve with your child or with the learner over time. And so, you know, it may be that initially a student, or sorry, I keep saying student, a child may need a visual schedule, and over time they may, you know, transition to more of a written planner or in their iPhone, just writing reminders. So making sure that whatever supports that the child needs, that it kind of evolves as they grow older and becomes meaningful and accessible to them. So and age appropriate, of course, too. You know, it's much more normal for a teenager to be carrying their phone and looking at a schedule than maybe carrying a board maker picture schedule. You know, of course, it's dependent on where they're at and what their needs are. but just making sure that it evolves with the individual as they grow older. And then just making them, giving those the opportunity for independence. As I mentioned, I used to manage our adult services, and there were some individuals that were given a lot of choice growing up and had a lot of opportunities to be a part of their education experience, and it showed, and they were able to make more, they were more self-determined, whereas some people had a harder time, even selecting something to do on a break. So really building in that choice from a young age really helps them to be more independent as they grow older.
Yeah, and I can add one little thing that I see being very successful at home with little kids is a little to-do list. Just like we as adults used to do, grocery list when we go to a grocery store. Can we have a little 1, 2, 3? You don't have to have 6 things on your list, but having 1, 2 or 3 things that they need to accomplish in a short period of time, so that the little kids are not too overwhelmed. Little sticky note does a lot of support. You don't need to have beautiful pictures. You don't need to have all these great materials. You can just use a sticky note and just write 1, 2, 3, or do a little circles and then fill those circles in as the child is completing the requested steps.
Those are really great points. And even for our non-readers, doing a small sketch for somebody who is not incredibly artistic, doing a small sketch of 1, 2, 3 can be very helpful in the moment.
Absolutely.
I want to point out, I think one of the things I see with my, just to contribute a little bit with my teen and young adult patients is that, they see a schedule as being babyish or visual tools as babyish, even if it does really promote successful independence with some of these activities. And I think the more we can, as Adriana just shared, we use our grocery list, the more we can normalize that for our teens and young adults. Like, we all use different tools. I have my notebook that I would be lost without, and I rely on my Outlook calendar more than I would like to. So I think being able to normalize some of those tools and experiences is really helpful. I wonder on, and I know this is a bigger question, Dr. Ochoa, but on the medication side of things, how might medication influence or impact engagement with some of these other supports that Rose really went through and highlighted today?
I think medication can be very, ideally you don't want just to do medication. Medication can be really helpful, but it's really important to what's the setup for the child, what's the environment. And if you are talking about an individual that has autism, it's even more important. Like, we always pay attention in what's the classroom environment. Something that I have learned with experience is that if the child is not in the right environment, you may do the best medication possible, but that medication may not work because the child is not in a good place in terms of accommodations, in terms of what the child is being taught and how is the child being taught. So I believe an environment, a structured environment with clear directions, with clear supports are the really necessary to complement the medication. You cannot just talk about medication when you think about treating ADHD.
Such a good point. I'm wondering on the, we talked a lot about interventions and supports. I'm wondering if you all have come across and I guess interacted on the parent support side, because parents are already doing so much for their children, and with parents of kids with autism and ADHD, there's that added level of kind of support needed to provide that those additional tools and structures that we were talking about. I'm wondering what you all have seen as effective supports for families.
So I can just maybe mention that if you have a child with autism or ADHD and you have the IEP team, I think these teams are so knowledgeable and have so much resources that as a parent, I think that should be or could be one of your huge resource to count on or reach out to in terms of what can I do with my child when I go to a community, or when we go out to a church, my child does not know how to sit. I think speech and OT and behavior therapists on the IEP team should be very or are very helpful with these type of questions.
I also see I see a question that's come through in the chat. The parent of a daughter of a 2-year-old and having a lot of questions, but not knowing really where to start, which I think is a common experience and feeling for parents, especially of really young kiddos. It sounds like this parent has tried to access a lot of resources, but feeling like she's not making a lot of progress. And when it comes to wanting to start ABA, recommending specific companies or specific programs. I know we highlighted this in the presentation last week, and I'll put it in the chat again, but I think Easterseals has a wonderful resource center. The Autism Center at Rush has a wonderful kind of resource center in which you can connect with individuals to receive referrals and recommendations on specific companies or programs based off of your insurance, your location, your child's age. And so there are wonderful companies and programs out there. I would say a lot of that is going to be based on some of those factors. So I'll put in the direct number for the Autism Resource Directory, and Rose, you can do so for the Easterseals program, and depending on where you're at, you can reach out to one of those teams and we can get you some specific companies and programs as a good starting point tomorrow.
Another point that I would add to that, in just talking like general, is the word of mouth is a really good, checking with other families what kind of experience they have had with, families that have other children that have autism. That can be helpful, and you can talk to families about what to look for and what kind of experience they have with different programs. And there are a lot of like ABA programs but there are also that ABA programs that go home. There are other ABA programs that are center-based. So you bring your child to the center and your child receives the services over there. And there are also some like therapeutic preschools in the city, in different areas of the city, where children, you drop your child, but then your child is with other children. And at times they get intense therapy services in an individualized way, but they get the opportunity to interact with other kids also. So there are a number of options out there.
It's a really good point. I think the service delivery can be can really look a lot of different ways, and depending on your child's needs and your family structure, there's going to be different programs that are going to work best for you. I think the other thing I'd like to highlight that I think was touched on just briefly is really accessing other parents and using other parents as tools, because you have certainly professionals who can help guide, but then being able to connect with other parents who are in similar experiences and have gone through similar experiences as you can also be an incredibly powerful and supportive resource. So there are a variety of support-based groups and connection groups online as well as in person throughout the city and the suburbs. Some focus on autism and autism with other comorbid needs, as well as just ADHD. And so those are certainly resources that we can share with the attendees today as a follow-up. Let's see. Are there any other questions that our participants have, or common questions that you as providers have heard that you think might be relevant for the attendees today? All right. All right, well, in that case, why don't we go ahead and wrap up? We will be able to send, again, some of these follow-up resources to the to all that attended, as well as the presentation. And then we'll send the QR or the sign up link to be able to have the resources that Rose was talking about mailed out to families. So be on the lookout for that tomorrow. And if there are any questions, you can feel free to reach out to our teams directly. Let's see. Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And then there are not CEUs offered for this presentation, unfortunately, but good question. All right, well, again, Rose, thank you so much for sharing your expertise. Thank you, Cesar and Adriana, for joining today.
Bye-bye.
All right,
Thank
take care.
you. Bye-bye.